Hello, everyone, and welcome to Literary Tales. I'm your host, Paul Krause, and in this episode, we turn to the greatest play of Aristophanes, Lysistrata. Modern feminist readings are crude and have roundly been criticized by classicists as it relates to their interpretations of Lysistrata. The proto-feminist readings miss the weight and scope of Aristophanes' thoroughgoing reactionary outlooks that Leo Strauss examined in Socrates and Aristophanes. Lysistrata is not the culminating work of his so-called peace plays. Instead, it is Aristophanes' most daunting and profound work of civilizational criticism. It is his most mature and intellectual work, along with being his most risque and shocking work. Lysistrata is Aristophanes' attempt to fully wrestle with sexual deviancy, degeneracy, tyranny, and war. The play is filled, from start to finish, with sexual innuendo after sexual innuendo. Given the later date of Lysistrata in comparison to the Wasps, which also, though more subtly, dealt with sexual deviancy and degeneracy, Lysistrata is Aristophanes' attempt to fully wrestle with sexual deviancy, tyranny, and war, and how they are all interrelated in a way that might make Camille Paglia blush. The first three gods invoked in the play, Bacchus, Aphrodite, and Pan, are all nymphomaniacs. When Lysistrata begins explaining her very big plan, Calanice playfully responds, "Mon kai paxi? Do you mean something long and thick?" Lysistrata answers with a counter pun and sexual innuendo, "Kai nai dia paxi? Indeed, something very long and thick." Lysistrata's big plan is fully revealed when she says, "We must renounce sex." The women around her are disturbed by the plan. They begin to cry and walk away until Lysistrata convinces them to stay. Even after several days of success, the solidarity of the women is tested when various women make excuses to get away and have the sex they crave. That the women are so disturbed by the need to renounce sex in favor of chastity or virginity testifies to the sexual violence of Athens during the final decades of the 5th century BC, something that Euripides deftly deals with in his plays, especially the Bacchae, the Medea, and the Trojan women. It is therefore significant that Lampedo, the Spartan woman of the play, is the first to agree with Lysistrata's declaration that the women must renounce sex. The unity of Lysistrata and Lampedo, of Sparta and Athens, also mocks the notion of Athenian exceptionalism yet again. In fact, it takes a Spartan to help bring about the peace that all will benefit from. Athens cannot do it alone. Over the course of the play, however, Aristophanes assails the older depiction of women as nymphomaniacs. But that doesn't mean he was a sort of proto-feminist, as some modern readings try to extrapolate, or that the women of the play are sexually modest. They most certainly are not, as Lysistrata tells her sisters in arms to dress provocatively and to entice men as far as possible without succumbing to the sexual act, like a lioness on a cheese grater. The women of the play must learn sexual modesty and control over the course of the play and devote themselves to the goddess Athena instead of Bacchus, Pan, or Aphrodite, the three gods who were originally invoked at the beginning of the drama. Nearly halfway through the play, Aristophanes reveals the most important speech by Lysistrata when she is confronting the chauvinistic and warlike magistrate. When the magistrate barks, "What have you ever done for the war effort?" Lysistrata answers with the cold truth that the future of civilization rests on the family and that the burden of civilization falls on women, not men. As she says, "We've contributed to it twice over and more. For one thing, we've given you sons and had to send them off to fight. For another, we're in the prime of our lives, and how can we enjoy it with our husbands always away on campaign and us left at home like widows, and quite apart from us married women? What about the unmarried ones who are slowly turning into old maids? A man comes home, he may be old and gray, but he can get himself a young wife in no time. But a woman's not in bloom for long, and if she isn't taken quickly, she won't be taken at all. And before long, she's left sitting at home, hoping to see some omen foretelling a happier future." Lysistrata is a play extolling and promoting, despite the carnal imagery around it, the virtue of virginity and chastity. After all, the gods Bacchus, Aphrodite, and Pan are superseded by the virgin queen Artemis and the virgin goddess Athena. In doing so, Aristophanes nods in agreement with Aeschylus that Athena is the supreme goddess. The reconciling image at the conclusion of the play is of men and women, husband and wife, united together in joyful song and feast. The participants sing a song to Athena to celebrate peace and the restoration of the family. The peace won by women was through their learning of chastity, and men also learning to control their lust to dominate, to come into happy union with women to form a family. Aristophanes simultaneously deconstructs the nymphomaniac image of women that had come to dominate Athenian consciousness by showing them to be the ones who can control their sexual desires, while depicting the men as sexually depraved animals some 2,400 years before Sigmund Freud. Women set the bar for civilization and control the course of civilization because they bear the burden of child rearing and labor. However, Aristophanes also maintains, as Lysistrata's culminating speech indicates, that women are happiest as wives and mothers. The joyful life for a woman is to live the married life with a faithful husband and with children in peace and not in isolation as a widow or, heaven forbid, unwed, where they sulk away in isolation and rage, leading them to kill their husbands and children like Clytemnestra or Medea. Moreover, the women of the play metaphorically represent the primacy of the household. The men, by contrast, represent the lust to dominate and the tyranny of the politics of Athens. It is women, not men, who are the heart and head of the family, according to Aristophanes. Beneath Lysistrata, Aristophanes is also engaged in a long-running commentary on the relationship of sex, violence, and war. St. Augustine may have summarized it better and more explicitly, but we can see in Lysistrata, and through much of Aristophanes' surviving corpus, how sexual lust leads to the libido dominandi, the lust to dominate. Athens was guilty of provoking the war with Sparta precisely because it couldn't control its appetites in more ways than one. Thucydides reveals that it was always the goal of Athens to consummate an empire from the coasts of Ionia down to Libya, Sicily, and even Carthage. You can look especially in books 2 6, and 7 in the history of the Peloponnesian War to see this. As Euripides began to reveal in his plays, and as Aristophanes makes explicit in his, especially here in Lysistrata, the sex-craved festivals, nymphomaniac gods, and the indulgence of sexual gratification and sexual slavery that had gripped Athens coincided with Athens' lust for empire, leading to the destruction of the family, the imposition of tyranny, and ultimately war and the fall of the Athenian Empire. There was, in Aristophanes' mind, a direct connection between the inability to control the sexual passions with the sudden explosion of political and military violence which was thrust upon Greece by Athens. Lysistrata is a profound play, worthy of psychological and sociological consideration, even if we may not necessarily agree with Aristophanes' reactionary answer to the problem of sex, violence, and imperialism, or even agree that sexual deviancy leads to societal and political violence. Yet in Lysistrata, we see Aristophanes engaged in that intense psychological, sociological, and civilizational criticism. When a civilization is in the throes of tyranny, violence, and crisis, it is necessary to peel back the veil and to try to ascertain and to understand what the problems are. Aristophanes does exactly that, and it isn't a surprise that in the culminating image, the dance of men and women, that it is done before the goddess of reason, Athena. In doing so, Aristophanes is implicitly asserting that even though the play be a hilarious, dramatic, and sexually laced comedy, that Aristophanes is also engaged in rational criticism and inquiry. The city of Athens, Aristophanes' beloved hometown, was in a crisis. In Lysistrata, Aristophanes gives us the answer to that crisis: the reunion of men and women in peace, to give birth to a family in peace. And it is through a family at peace with itself that the happiness and joy that we all seek in life can be consummated.